Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well because we have a new epic history video to react to called the Battle of the Wabash. This is a continuation of the Northwest Territory, America's first loss. As we saw, they basically took Fort Washington to a city that I cannot pronounce, but a city of the Northwest Territory, the Confederation of the Northwest Territory. Native Americans. It basically didn't go well. Did go well twice. Let's see what happens this time. Make sure you hit that like button and let's go.
1791. For years, the United States Northwest Territory has simmered with violence between Native American tribes and U.S. settlers. After the humiliation of General Harmar's defeat the previous year, General Arthur Sinclair has orders from President Washington to lead a second attack against tribes of the Northwestern Confederacy, a punitive expedition to ensure future compliance.
The problem, though, was that we saw is that they could not incentivize enough people to sign up for this, so it was like very sparse.
That summer, Sinclair's force assembles near Fort Washington, today the city of Cincinnati, Ohio.
That's another cool fact I didn't notice.
Troops then advance 18 miles to the banks of the Great Miami River and construct a supply base named Fort Hamilton. General Sinclair, however, has to travel 70 miles to Lexington to find his militia reinforcements. In the end, he gets just 400 men, less than half what he'd been promised. In his absence, his second-in-command, Major General Richard Butler, is in charge. 48 years old, Irish-born, Butler had been a distinguished regimental commander in the Revolutionary War, frequently praised by Washington himself. He also has considerable experience of negotiating with the Northwestern Confederacy and knows several of the chiefs personally.
Yeah, but this doesn't feel like a negotiation. It feels like a occupation.
Following Sinclair's orders, as soon as Fort Hamilton is complete, Butler leads the army north. It's October 4th, a late start for what had been planned as a summer campaign.
Yeah, well, this only takes about 7 days, I thought.
The nights are already colder, and days shorter. The army's advance through the forest is painfully slow. Narrow trails have to be widened for wagons and artillery. But there is a dire shortage of axes and saws. For the first 5 days of the advance, the army averages just 4.5 miles a day.
Yeah, never mind. It's going to take them a little longer than what I said.
When Sinclair rejoins the army, he is infuriated by the snail-like progress. But at every stage, he is hampered by a lack of equipment and supplies. He is particularly concerned about the shortage of flour for baking bread. On October 12th, heavy rain is followed by the first frost. And in freezing mud, Sinclair's army grinds to a halt. Conditions for the troops are miserable. It rains constantly. Rations have been halved, and morale is at rock bottom. Soldiers begin to desert in growing numbers. Incredibly, the 6-month contracts of many levied troops now start to expire mid-campaign. And as soon as their time is up, many, understandably, choose to go home. 9 days into the advance, 40 miles north of Fort Hamilton, Sinclair orders the construction of another supply base. This one will be named Fort Jefferson. It takes 2 weeks to build. Sinclair's decision to secure his supply route in this fashion is militarily prudent, but it's costing a lot of time. And his troops remain cold, wet, and hungry. At Fort Jefferson, 3 soldiers are caught trying to desert. Sinclair decides to make an example of them, and they are hanged.
Dang! That's crazy.
The army...
I don't know if that ruins your morale at all. That hurts the morale, I would say. These are friends of the individual, probably.
...is now down to 1,500 men. Already a third of its strength has been lost to sickness, desertion, or left behind to garrison forts. Things are so bad, Sinclair considers turning back. He himself is suffering agonizing attacks of gout that leave him unable to ride a horse. But he decides to continue the advance. A few days later, it begins to snow, and the army, having again run out of flour, halts once more.
If they build another damn fort. Okay. Crazy. It seems somewhat extraordinary that the tribes should have allowed us to be long in the interior of their country, or looked at us. Did they look at us? They could have been watching.
As U.S. troops await supplies, Little Turtle and fellow commanders of the Northwestern Confederacy have been formulating their response to the expedition. They have observed the slow progress of Sinclair's force and already picked off a few stragglers and deserters.
Dang.
They know their forces are now evenly matched in numbers. So rather than retreat, as they'd done the previous year, the chiefs decide to challenge the U.S. Army head-on in battle.
Oh.
The dense woodland and their experience as hunters and warriors will give them an advantage. Yet, it is a break with their usual hit-and-run tactics and extremely high risk. But so too are the stakes. General Sinclair is oblivious to the looming threat. His handful of scouts from the allied Chickasaw tribe have failed to detect the large enemy force. Now, he makes a fateful decision. Expecting a vital flour convoy to arrive any day, he fears it will be hijacked by deserters from his own army. So he dispatches Major Hamtramck and 300 men of the 1st Regiment, his best troops, to find the convoy and
That's interesting. Your best troops to find a convoy?
escort it safely to the army.
I guess.
Then, he resumes his march. On November 3rd, believing himself to be within striking distance of his target, Kikiangi, although in reality completely lost, he gives the order to set up camp. He chooses a position atop a steep-sided plateau beside the Wabash River. Trusting to the strong natural defenses, he gives no order to fortify the camp. And while most of the army bivouacs in rectangular formation on the high ground, limited space means the militia companies have to camp 300 yards away, on the other side of the Wabash, here just a shallow stream. If there is an attack, it will be very difficult for either camp to support the other.
Yeah, because you don't really have a crossing, do you?
At that moment, more than 1,000 warriors of the Northwestern Confederacy are assembling,
Oh no.
just 2.5 miles away.
Oh no.
They know exactly where the U.S. forces are, and the next morning, at dawn, they will attack.
Wow. Crazy. We can do nothing unless assisted by our great Father above. I pray that tomorrow he will Cause the sun to shine out. We will take it. Blue jacket. It's on.
In the cold early morning darkness of November 4th,
of course they're gonna attack the smaller one first. Oh, they're not gonna be able. They're gonna get annihilated and drowned because they're gonna try to cross. I don't. That's my prediction. They're gonna get pushed to the river, and then some of them are gonna drown in the river and be crazy. I don't know what else is gonna happen, but my first guess will be
1,200 warriors move into position. They are in a crescent formation. On the left, Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi warriors. On the right, Wyandot, Mingo, and Cherokee. And in the center, Shawnee, Lenape, and Miami. Just before 7 a.m., with the sun's first light streaking through the trees, they let out a giant war cry and advance. In the U.S. camp, soldiers are making breakfast. Rumors swirl of recent sightings of Native Americans, reports which have not been passed to General Sinclair.
oh, they are screwed.
Now, militia sentries to the west are horrified to see hundreds of warriors advancing through the trees. They fire their weapons and run, pursued by a hail of musket balls. The inexperienced militia are taken completely by surprise. They fire a few shots and either run or are cut down where they stand. Their camp is overrun in minutes. Survivors scrambling through the freezing water of the Wabash and up the slope to the main camp.
Surprised they made it across. Must be not that wide.
Here, U.S. regulars and levy regiments are stood too, alerted by the sound of war cries and musket fire. Their 6 cannon are loaded and ready to fire. But panic
Only 3 is positioned though.
stricken militia rushing into camp block their line of fire.
Oh no.
And it is difficult to target an enemy who moves in small groups, dashing from cover to cover. When the guns do open fire, their shots go high, crashing through branches overhead. While Miami, Shawnee, and Lenape warriors make a frontal attack on the camp, focusing attention, the 2 wings of the Native American
They're getting surrounded.
Army push through the woods to encircle Sinclair's camp. U.S. outposts are quickly overrun or flee back to camp. Firing from cover, Native American sharpshooters begin to pick off U.S. gun crews and officers. Within 30 minutes, a quarter of Sinclair's force are casualties.
A quarter in half an hour? My God.
Or have fled into the woods. More men are falling every minute. Sinclair recognizes the danger his army is in and orders Lieutenant Colonel Dark, commanding the 1st Levy Regiment, to clear the rear of the camp. Dark takes 5 companies, about 300 men, and leads them forward in a wheeling bayonet charge to the right. He is supported by 50 mounted dragoons on the left. Wyandot warriors fall back before them. But it is a trap. They are luring the U.S. troops out of position. By the time they reach Buck Run Creek, they're cut off and surrounded. The Wyandots renew their attack, inflicting heavy losses on Dark's men as they fall back to camp. Meanwhile, Shawnee warriors attack the southern end of the camp, where the slope is less steep. They overwhelm dragoons and levy troops guarding the perimeter and break into the center of the camp. Here they fall on wounded soldiers and civilians sheltering behind the front line. These include camp followers, servants, cooks, wives, a few children. Dozens are killed. Sinclair sends Major Hart, commanding the 2nd Regiment, to clear the camp at Bayonet Point and rescue any survivors. Hart's attack is successful, but he is shot and killed, and his men suffer heavy losses. About half the U.S. regular officers are now dead, and second-in-command Major General Butler has been wounded twice. Some soldiers...
Those 300 soldiers are very important now, aren't they? The ones that they're best soldiers to go for the flower. How important was that?
Stunned by the horrors unfolding around them, simply give up and cower behind any cover they can find. It is now 8:30 a.m. A short lull in the fighting follows, which Sinclair uses to pull in his perimeter and form a tighter defense. It is the quiet before the storm.
Really?
Little Turtle and the war chiefs are rallying their men for one final attack.
My God. Crazy guys. Exposed to a crossfire. Men and officers falling in every direction. 2 minutes longer, the retreat would be practical. Delay was death. Now what? Do we flee? Do we stand? What say you, Claire?
2 hours have passed since the initial attack, and Sinclair sees that if they do not break out through the enemy lines now, his entire force will be wiped out. The handful of surviving officers rally the men for a do-or-die charge, back down the trail by which they'd arrived. With fixed bayonets, U.S. regulars lead the way, pushing through the enemy's skirmish line. Anyone who can still walk hurries behind, but dozens of wounded are left to their fate. The breakout soon turns into a mad dash, as terrified survivors dump weapons and kit in their race to escape. Sinclair lingers at the rear of the column to ensure as many get clear as possible. He is one of the last to leave the battlefield.
Honorable.
Warriors pursue the shattered U.S. Army for several miles. Then they return to the campsite to loot and finish off the wounded. Among them, Major General Butler. The warriors of the Northwestern Confederacy celebrate into the night. The Battle of the Wabash, which would come to be known as Sinclair's defeat, is over.
Did I not, in the last words I said to him, warn him against a surprise?
The U.S. rout doesn't stop until exhausted survivors reach Fort Jefferson that evening, a distance of 30 miles.
Hey, at least they built the fort. You know, I was talking crap about the forts, but heck, they needed it.
Here, the roll is taken, and their appalling losses revealed. 2/3 of the army have been either killed, wounded, or are missing. All 6 guns have been lost, along with the baggage train and 1,200 muskets. Native
1,200 muskets? Jesus, guys.
American losses are around 20 dead and 40 wounded. It has been an utter rout and a humiliating defeat, the largest the United States Army will ever suffer against Native Americans, and costlier than any battle of the Revolutionary War. But it was not entirely unforeseen. General Harmar, defeated himself by Little Turtle the previous year, had expressed grave concerns about Sinclair's expedition. His views were recorded by Lieutenant Denny, unfortunate enough to have served in both expeditions.
Wow.
Harmar saw with what material the bulk of the army was composed. Men collected from the streets and prisons of the cities, hurried out into the enemy's country, and the officers commanding them totally unacquainted with the business in which they were engaged.
They didn't know what they were doing, basically.
Not any one department was sufficiently prepared. Both quartermaster and contractors extremely deficient. It was a matter of astonishment to him that the commanding general, who was acknowledged to be perfectly competent, should think of hazarding, with such people and under such circumstances, his reputation and life, and the lives of so many others. Knowing, too, the enemy with whom he was going to contend, an enemy perhaps superior to an equal number of the best men that could be taken against them.
It's not even about like enemy superiority and all that. It's about the environment to which you are going into and the type of warfare that they exert. On a standing battle, America would win 10 times out of 10. On a standing battle. But in a forest, in enemy territory, that's a different ball. That's a different.
Sinclair's defeat led to the United States' first congressional investigation. Their report cleared Sinclair of personal blame, but found a long list of failures in the preparation and execution of his campaign. The next U.S. general sent to take on the Northwestern Confederacy, General Mad Anthony Wayne, would first impose major reforms on the U.S. Army. He would insist on more resources, greater professionalism, improved training and tactics, and better reconnaissance. For the Native Americans, the Battle of the Wabash was a brilliant victory, won through courage and tactical skill. It marks out Little Turtle, Blue Jacket, and Bacongahelas as among the most successful Native leaders of all time in the wars against the United States. But it also proves to be the high point of their resistance.
Yeah, at some point this is going to give, right?
Their enemy would soon escalate the Northwest Indian War, and under the leadership of General Wayne, bring it to a conclusion at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. The inexorable westward march of the United States would continue.
Wow. Great video. Great video. Yeah, I you know, at some point, you know, the resources that America has is 100x the resources that Northwest Territory has in terms of like ammunition, in terms of men, guns, everything else. So like, it's gonna bend, it's gonna break. They did well. They did well against the first two expeditions, against a unprepared convoy, but it was eventually gonna break. How it goes. Dang, what a rout. What a rout that they put on them at Wabash. That was probably a horrific scene to be an American at during that time. Horrific, nightmarish. The civilians that were just part of the train, that maybe they're accompanying their husbands or children even, and all that, just horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible. But balance. You go one way, then you go the other, as always. And also, as always, I appreciate you watching. Appreciate you reacting alongside with me. Thank you guys so much for watching this. Leave a video recommendation down below. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Out.